Before you comment on the title, let me explain what I mean. I made a video a couple days ago talking about the Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen prices, and basically said while I believe they are overpriced, I don't think we should shame people for thinking it's worth it or thinking it's too much since value is subjective. I even made a community poll asking if it's worth it, and as of the time of recording, it's basically 50-50, so it clearly is very divisive. There's clearly not one answer that everyone sees is right. My personal view is that $20 for a basic port of a GBA game is overcharging. I went over that in the previous video, but I want to talk about something else here. While I had a lot of comments agreeing with me and a lot of people fine with the $20 prices, a lot were still perfectly respectful and reasonable. I talked about some of the ridiculous arguments some Pokemon fans have made for pricing, like saying the original cartridges go for $150, so anything under that price is a steal, or since the game launched at $40 and it's $20 now, that means it's a great price. And I was seeing a lot of people passionately defend these takes, and I did touch on this other video as well, but I really think a lot of people are either being dense or legitimately just don't understand the issues with these. And it's pushing me to agree more with the Nintendo haters, because while I disagree with them on a lot, like obviously I'm not a Nintendo hater since it is my favorite video game company, they've been more reasonable on the specific topic. And that's not to say that they've been completely reasonable on this. I'm finding myself agreeing with more of them than the defenders of this because of some of the takes I've been seeing and because of some of the people who are just arguing for the sake of arguing on this. So my entire point of the other video was it's pointless to shame someone for buying something like this because value is subjective. If someone buys that, like that's not something you should spend time arguing with them. I don't think there's a problem if you say it's your right if you want to buy it, but personally I think it's an issue because I think that's perfectly fine. I think it's an issue when it just becomes a shouting match and it's just coming down to personal opinion rather than facts. But both groups are emotional here, and when you get emotional, you lose a lot of rationality, but the defenders here seem to be a lot more emotional. I have to clarify, this is not everyone, and even if you agree with the $20 price tag, I'm not necessarily talking about you. I'm just talking about the reasons here that I feel are not sound arguments. So starting with the first argument that says this game being $20 is a steal because the going price is $150 on eBay or wherever resellers are selling this. Not even arguing if $20 is a fair price or not doesn't matter when we shut down this logic. Supply and demand is very basic to understand on a surface level. An example is if Nintendo makes 100 physical copies of a special edition Pokemon game, there's going to be a lot of demand for that with little supply causing the price to go up. Since FireRed and LeafGreen haven't been in production for like 20 years and they're very popular, there's been less copies available for sale and a lot of people wanting to buy it, causing the prices to go up. People aren't paying $150 for the game itself, they're paying for the physical cartridge. You can get a replica cartridge for like $5 that plays the game, so clearly that's not what it's about. And of course, there's ways to get this game for free that I shouldn't have to talk about in this video. Now for the other argument that since this game launched at $40 and it's half that now, that means it's a good deal. Once again, we don't need to actually agree on the price to argue this logic. Now there was another argument I saw that I think perfectly shows how this whole conversation keeps getting twisted, and it came from someone I was replying to directly. At first the point was pretty simple. He said if Pokemon LeafGreen is going for over $100 on eBay, then clearly the game hasn't depreciated in value. This was in response to me saying that games depreciate in value over time. And on the surface, I get why that sounds convincing. If something used to be $40 and now people are paying $100 plus $150, it feels like it gained value. But that only works if you treat the physical resale market and digital pricing like they're the same thing, and they're just not. When I pointed out that those eBay prices are driven by scarcity and collectors, not the actual game itself, that's where the shift happened. Instead of sticking with that argument, you pivoted to saying digital games rarely go down in price, and Nintendo was just offering a legitimate way to play something people have wanted for years, and those are two completely different arguments. One is about whether a game has appreciated, and the other is about whether $20 is justified for a digital release. The problem is the original point falls apart once you separate physical and digital. Cartridges are expensive because there's a limited number of them. That's supply and demand. Digital copies have unlimited supply, so they don't follow that same logic. You can't use a collector-driven resale market to justify the price of something that has no scarcity. That connection just doesn't hold up at all. And then the new argument doesn't really fix that either. Saying digital games don't go down in price just isn't true if you look at the industry as a whole. Outside of Nintendo, older games are almost always cheaper, permanently reduced, or constantly on sale. That's just the norm when games get older. So what ends up happening is the conversation shifts away from the original claim instead of actually defending it. It's not even that this is some rare gotcha moment. This happens a lot in these discussions, and while I talk about one specific one, I've seen this all over the place, at least variations of it. Someone starts with a point that sounds strong, it gets challenged, and instead of reinforcing that, the argument changes into something else. Either you'll hear straw mans or the goalpost will be moved, but if you have to change the argument entirely, it usually means the original one wasn't solid to begin with. The problem isn't that some of the people agree with the $20 price, because like I said, value is subjective. If you feel it's worth $20, I have no problem with you. The issue is the lengths people will go to justify it by using bad logic and just flat out lying to try and defend it. All you need to say to defend it is you feel the value is worth it to you. You can still acknowledge that the price of cartridges for the original isn't the justification for it, or say that digital games more often than not do appreciate over time. Like a good example, Fallout New Vegas, one of my favorite games of all time. It released in 2010 at $60, and it's $10 now. If you go to Steam and look up any big AAA game, the chances of it being less than its original price if it's a few years old is extremely high. And if it's a game that's 20 plus years old, like Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen, there's probably a 99% chance it's lower in price than it originally released. And this isn't just Steam, you'll see this on PlayStation, Xbox as well. You'll even see this with Nintendo at some points. Also, I do have to mention that $40 for the originals at least got you the physical cartridge, the box, a wireless adapter, and a manual. And this, you just get a digital key. And going back to the original price argument, Super Mario 64 was originally $60. So would it be okay if Nintendo just sold that digitally for $60 now with no changes? I would hope all of you said no to that because that would be a little ridiculous. And I mean, even if this wasn't on Nintendo Switch Online, charging $60 for a straight up port of an N64 game with no differences would be seen as crazy. I don't think many people would disagree with that. There are legitimately people who would support Nintendo and or Game Freak if Pokémon FireRed and LeafGreen were sold for $40. They would shift their argument from it's cheaper so it's worth it to it's the same price and there's also inflation so it's worth it. At some point you have to accept that some people will always find a way to defend something they love, whether it's a politician, a friend, or in this case a game and a company. Now, I'm not saying everyone who says $20 is fair for this is part of this group, because I think a lot of people just want the convenience of playing on their Switch without emulation, and in the grand scheme of things, $20 is not a lot of money. I have no problems with those people. I may disagree, and like I said in my last video, I don't want to shame anyone for that decision, even though I'm willing to have a respectful discussion from my perspective as to why I don't believe it's worth it. My point is to not try and grasp at straws and move the goalpost to defend your point. The most reasonable argument for this is just that these two games are incredibly popular, and Game Freak knows this. Most people who have wanted to play it who don't already have it will likely either get a replica cartridge or emulate it. They aren't dumb, they know that. They're charging $20 because they know there are a lot of people that want it officially and are willing to pay for it, and they probably said $20 is the most they could charge for each game without losing sales. If they charged $40 for it, they would push more people to emulators, because most would see that as an unreasonable price. But at $20, it's a much easier pill to swallow, and someone can see this price and be like, it's just $20, I want the convenience, and it's really as simple as that. So going back to the games themselves, this is an objectively lazy port, like you can't really argue against that. To my knowledge, they did nothing to change it. Now, someone might comment saying, what are you expecting them to do? And that's not really what I mean, because NSO games are the same games, and I'm not expecting Nintendo to do something drastic there. But I just feel if you're gonna sell these games on their own and you're gonna charge $20 for it, I think it's fair to expect something new. Like at least like online battles or something. I don't think we have online battles for it. You could let me know if I'm wrong, but it isn't changing anything. So the port itself is obviously not something that took that much work. It just comes down to if you personally believe that playing the game officially on your Switch is worth the $20. And I think people are totally fair to have grievances with this. Now, I did say that arguing and saying that someone buying a thing you think is overpriced and just arguing with them and shaming them just isn't the right move. I think a better move is explain to them, have a rational discussion, be respectful, and say, I understand why you may want this. At the end of the day, it's your choice. But personally, I believe that we're just supporting overpricing. And if we keep supporting them overcharging games, then we're simply encouraging it. And if you want lower prices, if you want more effort put into things, just vote with your wallet. I have no problem with someone trying to make an argument like that. But if someone disagrees with you, then there's nothing you can do about it. At the end of the day, it's video games. It doesn't matter that much. With that being said, it still is important to vote with your wallet. If you feel a company is taking advantage, it doesn't mean don't call them out. But I feel like a lot of people, especially people who are very passionate Pokemon fans, have kind of lost that. Like, you can still say that you think the price is a little high, but it's still worth it to you. But if you have to just go through all these hoops to try and justify, whether you're saying the two big arguments I talked about in this video as justifications, like, it's just a problem there. Like, you're defending a company so much that you're willing to just deny like all forms of logic and reasoning to come up with a justification when the justification is very simple for this. It just makes Pokemon fans and Nintendo fans look bad. Like, I know there's two clashing communities on the internet where you have people who hate Nintendo and will call Nintendo out for anything, and you have people who will defend Nintendo all the time. And for anyone who actually watches my videos, like, you'll see most of the time I try to be fair to Nintendo. If I feel they're doing something right, I'll give them credit for that, but I also do call them out, because frankly, they've been making a lot of decisions I feel to be unfair recently. They've been overcharging products, in my opinion. So like I say in a lot of videos, I try to give a nuanced opinion, and when you have these two extremes clashing at each other, both sides look bad. But with that being said, I think on this particular issue, I think the people blindly defending the price and coming up with all these excuses are the bigger issue here. And I think the defenders calling out people who have complaints about this have just made this whole situation worse. And that's not to say that Nintendo haters calling out anyone who's even bought this are making the situation better, because they're obviously not. When you have to resort to arguments that you know deep down don't make sense, or create straw mans, then you have to think that maybe there's more nuance to this discussion than you'd like to believe. And I've seen a lot of straw mans on this topic. That's something I did want to touch on. So for those of you who don't know, it's when you exaggerate a point so it's easier to argue against. I saw a straw man on one of my videos. Someone said, people, don't make remakes, just sell the originals for 20 bucks and it would be fine. Game Freak, okay. People, no way you're charging $20 for this. So this is a straw man because it's just simplifying and exaggerating a whole other argument. I think there's a lot of people saying we want to see these games on Switch, but they're still unhappy with the price because they were expecting it to be a little lower. Like, that's not unreasonable. And I've seen this all over the place. People, quote unquote, clowning on people who wanted these games, but then criticize the price. By that logic, someone could say, I want Pokemon Black and White on Switch, like just a port of it. But then if Nintendo charged $500 for it and they criticized it, people could be like, oh, well, this is what you wanted, isn't it? And it's used because they don't really have a better argument to use. Because if you actually look at the real argument, most people are going to agree with that. If there's anything you take away from this video, whether you agree with the pricing or not, it's that you just can't reason with a lot of people. Like, you can have legitimate criticisms of the pricing and people will just straw man the argument to make you seem like you're crazy, or they'll just make up any justification they can for it. Simply buy the game if you feel it's worth it, don't buy it if you want it. If you want to have a discussion about if it's worth it, if you want to convince people to not buy it, do it in a respectful way, because you're a lot more likely to get through to people if you're actually respectful. No one's going to listen to someone who comes to them calling them an idiot or stupid or whatever, but if you could back up your reasoning, they're a lot more likely to listen. So I know this video was a long rant. I know I talked about a lot of this in the other Pokemon video if you saw this, but I've just seen a lot more talk about it since I've seen comments on it, comments on my videos, comments on other videos, comments all over the internet, and it is something I wanted to discuss more, because I know this won't solve anything. I know it's not important in the grand scheme of things, but I just thought it was something interesting to talk about, and I did just want to give my take on it. If you liked what I had to say here, be sure to subscribe. I just try to cover Nintendo, giving as fair opinions as I can. I try to avoid one extreme or the other, just because I think a lot of these situations have a lot more going on than people would make it seem like. It's usually not all bad and usually not all good. So I do thank you for watching if you watch this whole thing, and I'll see you next time.